Okay, so I don't know, has anybody been caught up in the graduation party vortex this year? We're not in that cycle. I know, so we had two high school graduations in our family, and so seeing my niece and nephew and their parents making the rounds, right? So everybody has those graduation parties, and yeah, so every time we're making plans for anything, they're always mentioning the, every weekend, one or two graduation parties going on. And I think of they weren't graduation parties, but, these meals that focus the first reading in the gospel today. The first one from Genesis, I love how we get a little taste of kind of the mystery of the Trinity in that. Remember that this moment of these three angels, the Lord, visiting Abraham, because we see even the jumping back and forth between the two. There's not a consistency there, right? The Lord appeared, and there's three men standing nearby. Then he says, "Sir, if I may ask you this favor." And then the men reply, "Very well." So there's kind of this jumping back and forth between singular and plural, the three, the one. So we get a little foretaste of the Trinity there. And that moment made, also reinforced by that classic icon by Rublev, classic piece of Christian artwork, that icon from the 1400s. So that we get that meal going on there. And then, of course, the Martha Mary meal and Bethany and their brother Lazarus. Again, don't forget the last, I think 3-4 years ago, Pope Francis extended the feast day, which is coming up July 29th, I believe it's 29th, of St. Martha, to now be the feast of Saints Mary, Martha, and Lazarus of Bethany. And I love that he did that. This was a place of hospitality. If Jesus was going to go to a graduation party, this would have been where it would be at, right? Good friends of his. So, but part of that graduation party dynamic, or any of the things we could be hosting, especially bigger gatherings, is this, especially for the parents, or whoever's organizing the thing, right? This challenge of handling making sure everything's out, provided for, the food stocked, the beverages are not running out. We're replacing the buffalo chicken dip, whatever it might be, but also trying to be a gracious host and see people. And that balance. My one, typically friends of my sister-in-law and my sister, who were the hosts, were gracious enough to jump in to do a lot of that stuff, to allow for the parents that were hosting the grad parties to kind of be present to the people. But if you don't have that necessarily, it's a challenge, right? It's real. My one time I get to do that, I host the Super Bowl party for the priests. I've been doing that the last 2 or 3 years now. And so get a little taste of that as well, But it's a bit of an art, right? And it's necessary. The hope is that we know that the connecting with our friends and family is the more important piece. But we also know that they're here to eat, and we want to show them hospitality. And some of us might be drawn to different dynamic of that when it comes to those parties, and those hostings. Some of us might be more inclined, I'm just good doing the serving and not, getting into that whole scene of just jumping around and touching base with people. Some prefer, the touching base. But nonetheless, we see this parallel. We can't help but see these two meals, two people, two groups hosting God for a meal, So pretty phenomenal in that parallel of the two. And, both of them have this instinct, Abraham too, with Sarah, let's go, let's provide, let's see what we can, this is a special guest, God is here. We don't know exactly how much Abraham knew who these people were, who he was hosting, but, certainly that was a huge part of the ancient Far East culture, right? Hospitality. And so they're trying to set the table well, and Martha is the one represented as doing that in the gospel when Jesus, the Son of God, comes to visit. And one of the lessons that we learn, and I hadn't, kind of newly reflected on by me, I usually would go to the Martha Mary and say, okay, yes, the Martha mission is important, but we know, and you've heard me say this over and over, that Mary, that time in communion with God and prayer has to feed the Martha, right? Has to feed the mission. It's got to be our Martha leading into our Mary leading into our Martha, right? And that's the best, way to put it all together. So you've heard me say that over and over. But another perspective on that, which really struck me this year, is this idea of Martha specifically trying to do what, everything she thinks she needs to do for the Son of God. This isn't just a particular mission. This is for God himself and this dynamic that we have. Our first instinct that we need to do everything for God. It's a classic tension in our Christian Catholic faith since the early church. This overemphasis on me doing, almost like I am achieving grace. I am accomplishing salvation by being gracious to God and doing these things for God. And, almost as if he needs me to do these things for him, right? So one of the other ways we can look at it when it comes to Mass, right? I'll do God a favor and go to Mass, He's going to be fine if you go to Mass or not, right? And I don't say that to diminish your need to go to Mass, but that shouldn't be the motivation, right? We go because of how much God does for us. We go because of, we're blown away by how much God provides for us and does for us. His very presence to us, whether it's with Abraham and Sarah or Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, just him coming to them is an amazing gift and more than any of us could ask for, but yet that's what our God does. And so it's more of not, hey, I'll do God a favor. It's, I owe God everything. The least I can do is to go and offer this worship to God and thank him. But the other side of it is how much I get, how much God gives us in himself, and certainly the way we experience that in such a special way at every Mass. We went through the Mass to Mission, the 1 hour to peace Mass to Mission a year ago, fall. So it's almost 2 years ago, it'll be this October, I think. And trying to just go deeper in that to say, do we realize how much God gives to us at every Mass? Growing in that attitude of gratitude, growing in that attitude of, why would I want to miss this? I would never want to miss it. Again, Father Larry Richards, who I, kind of grew up with a little bit and certainly have done some ministry with him and retreats. And, he was known he came and did a mission down in Meadville for me one year. And he starts off by this, just saying, if I were to, in his spiel for the mission, that we show at the weekend Masses, he just says, if I were to say to you that this Monday, I'm going to be giving out $1 million at church, would you be there? And then going on to say, what God gives us at every Mass, it, blows $1 million away. Do we believe that? Do we know that? Do we, so is what motivates us, that we come here to receive that, because we say, where else would we be? We echo the words of St. Peter, where else shall we go, Lord? How could we not be here when we know what we understand you share with us every Mass, every Sunday? We want to be here. We need to be here. We can't imagine being anywhere else. So yeah, not doing God a favor, although it's very pleasing to him and he loves that we come, but he doesn't need us to come. We need to come. And hopefully that's part of the lesson. Mary knew that need to be in the presence, and that it wasn't about what she was going to do for Jesus, that it was all about what Jesus could do for her. And Abraham and Sarah had to learn that lesson, right? It was nice they wanted to be hospitable, but it was more about what God was wanting to do with them and for them. So I hope we can be renewed in that appreciation. We don't come here again to do God a favor. We come here because we need him, we want him, and we echo every week those words from St. Peter. Where else would we go, Lord? You have the words of eternal life. You have the greatest banquet, the greatest grad party the world has ever seen, and we're going to be there every week.